morning, everyone.
Morning.
Welcome to Money Can't Buy Me Love. I'm not going to sing. I asked if I could, and she said yes, but I chickened out. So my name is Mason Rummel, and welcome to what promises to be a very entertaining and thought-provoking look at what money can buy if it can't buy you love. I'm going to start out, though, if anybody went to the council meeting, there was a session on endowments day before yesterday, and I'm going to read a couple sound bites from it. So just listen to this. This is a drumbeat that we're hearing. These are quotes, actually, but I'm not attributing them to anybody. We need to be careful about how we are messaging. If we aren't careful and we don't engage in intentional discussions about this, change will come and we won't like it. Some who critique foundations may be inclined to reward those who act more quickly by spending down, perhaps. There are many different ways foundations are using their endowments. Are endowments too independent? Are they too powerful? There is a distrust. They don't understand what we're doing. The notion that endowment gifts somehow no longer have a private character, but it takes on a public character. The conversation about endowments is suffering much like other issues, which is lack of historical context and data. This is the bizarre echo chamber we are existing. We are not immune, and foundations are associated with the 1%. For some time, and especially in recent weeks, we've heard a steady drumbeat of negative and downright disturbing views of endowed philanthropy. Warehousing money, as some call it, does not do enough to address immediate needs or do anything about the growing economic disparity in our communities. They say it is focused too much on the future rather than on today's most pressing and urgent problems. In fact, Congress's growing concern in this subject and interest in that view recently came to light in a letter from the Senate Finance Committee and House Ways and Means to 56 private institutions with endowments over $1 billion. It questioned their spending policies, and you could think of this as government intrusion. Other thought leaders are calling for broad conversations about the wisdom of foundations existing in perpetuity, or whether it would be better for all for them to spend down out of existence, thereby deploying more capital, perhaps too quickly, into communities. But the question is whether they have the capacity to handle such an influx of money so quickly, or whether communities and their decision makers have all of the answers to make the best decisions today for its use. Today you will get to hear 4 variations on arguments for the importance of endowed philanthropy, and you'll get to decide the best approach to support the argument supporting long-term or endowed philanthropy. So here's how it'll work. You'll vote on them twice. First, you will be asked to vote for the best argument as it's presented in writing. Afterward, you'll get to hear each of the panelists present his best version of the argument. And these panelists are experts in their fields and will bring the written argument to life with an eloquent and persuasive, though brief, presentation. The panelists' presentations are also in your program folders and packets. So when the panelists have finished, you'll be able to cast your vote again, indicating who offered the most compelling argument for the cause. These are arguments you can use today and tomorrow on Capitol Hill and at home or wherever you have the opportunity or the need to persuade others of the importance of long-term philanthropy and its value to our communities and society as a whole. But before we begin, join me in thanking these panelists who've given up the morning or part of the morning for us. Thank you. And now if we can put the 4 arguments up here, I will call on each one. They will each have 4 minutes. I don't know if we have a dinger to cut them off, but I'll have to cut them off. We have a dinger? Okay, great. All right, so here are the 4 arguments. A, our endowment allows us to continue the legacy of our donor. B, our endowed funds make it possible for us to maintain and utilize our diverse and complicated assets to keep the past alive. C, our endowed funds enable us to take a leadership role in responding to current needs in our community. And D, an endowment will allow us to grow into the future. So now's your chance to vote on the one you think is the most compelling argument, just in the written form.
I'm not sure it's working.
Oh, there we go. Woo! Meet community needs. All right. So let's see if the panelists are able to change your mind. And don't forget, when you vote at the end of this, there is a prize. There will be a winner. So each panelist now has 4 minutes to try. Our first panelist, we're not sitting in the right order, but I'll do it in the order that I've been instructed, is Jean Cochran, President and CEO of the Duke Endowment in North Carolina, who will speak about the donor's legacy. So Jean, you are on.
Thank you, Mason. It's my privilege to speak in a few minutes about the Duke Endowment, which was established by our donor in 1924. So we're in our 92nd year now of operation. The Duke family made their first fortune in tobacco, but got out of that business essentially entirely and moved into autos and a number of other things. Then in the late 1910s, moved into electrical power generation as a way of economic development for the Carolinas. So because of that investment there, which is now Duke Energy Corporation, the largest electrical supplier in the country, was to focus on improving the economic viability of the Carolinas coming out of a Civil War and a Reconstruction period and a very different South than the South that we see today. As part of that, the creation of the endowment gave structure to what the Duke family had been doing for 20 years. We have the records of family giving in child care, in health care, in higher education. And so when the endowment was created, it really codified what the family had been doing for a long period of time. One point, in 1917, 18, and 19, the Duke family put more money into Trinity College, which was a small Methodist school, than the state of North Carolina put into the University of North Carolina system. Now that's a commitment by a family to do. So when you codify that in a private foundation and you select this little Methodist college or this little Presbyterian college, you say we want to grow them over time and support them over time to becoming something else. So Trinity College now is Duke University. The little Presbyterian college is Davidson College. And yet during those periods of times, there were years in the Depression where the endowment contributed more to those schools than those schools earned on student tuition. A remarkable fact to me this day and time. And I think the other gift, though, that the Dukes gave to a perpetual foundation was discretion among our trustees within very certain bounds to change within, as he used the term, like charitable purpose, which to me is a key of how a perpetual foundation can adjust to changing times. Mr. Duke saw hospitals, but probably never would have anticipated hospice or community health clinics or rural clinics and rural programs, and yet gave discretion to our trustees to do that. Likewise, when you make investments in hospitals at a time was an organization that was very community driven, very cottage industry, and in many cases very inefficient. And so we've seen the growth of systems. And yet the big systems in the Southeast are all based in North Carolina. And while we will never take attribution to that, but we will certainly say a large foundation working in this area certainly made contributions to the growth of organizations. And my last point is, it is not just giving to an organization that's the point. The point is giving to strong organizations for what they can do in the communities that they represent. Duke was different. He didn't choose societal issues of the 1920s. He chose organizations to be lasting and long-time representative of the values that he held, and to trust communities and their community leaderships to help with the foundation determine what was best for those communities, but use the vehicle of a perpetual, long-standing private foundation as a way to do that. Thank you, Mason.
Thank you, Jean. Next, we have Scott Callan, who's the Director of Special Gifts at the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation.
Good morning. Thank you. Before we ever pursued our belief in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, before we ever held certain truths, self-evidence, there was a single daring idea, and that was the idea of America. Our mission at Colonial Williamsburg is to interpret the origins of the idea of America. We use the many diverse voices of the past with their different and sometimes conflicting ambitions to tell this important story. It's told through a 301-acre restored and reconstructed colonial capital, complete with costumed interpreters, full-service taverns, hotels, guest houses, 2 nationally recognized museums, and a belief instilled by our founder, John D. Rockefeller Jr., that the future can and must learn from the past. Colonial Williamsburg's collections broadly defined, encompass everything from the ephemera of the past to the stately original buildings dotting our historic streets. These collections include over 70,000 examples of British and American fine decorative and mechanical arts, 5,000 pieces of American folk art, and more than 20 million archaeological fragments ranging from shoe buckles and discarded wine bottles to the most minute fossilized microfauna. All of this serves the lofty purpose of telling us more about our founding of a nation and how the idea of America continues to inform us as a people. Endowment dollars factor critically in how we plan for the future. They provide stability and predictability, and they signal to our donors and our funders that Colonial Williamsburg has the means to continue making an impact into the next generation and beyond. Our endowment is the foundation on which we tell the story about the idea of America. And while the past may not change, how we tell those stories and who we tell them to are vitally important to each generation. And it requires a steadfast commitment to preserving and learning from the past at every turn. As groups like ISIS have sadly reminded us through their destruction of priceless antiquities in places like Mosul and Palmyra, there is no guarantee that the past will remain alive for us if we don't make every effort to ensure that it will. For many cultural institutions, these endowments not only ensure continuity in budgeting each year, they provide us the ability to meet new and emerging opportunities as they arise. Indeed, when a contingent from Iraq's Culture of Ministry visited Colonial Williamsburg in late 2014 studying best practices in collections conservation, we were able to offer them a temporary home for many of their invaluable artifacts, a gesture meant not only for its goodwill, but to help thwart the destruction of antiquities seen in that part of the world. We were able to extend that offer because of the infrastructure and the expertise sustained over many years, thanks in large part to our endowment. Colonial Williamsburg's endowment does not exist in a vacuum. It exists in service of our mission of preserving and telling a story core to our national identity, and that is the story of the idea of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Next, we have Brent Christopher, who is with the,
Communities Foundation of Texas.
Texas. I was about to say Dallas, but Texas. Thank you.
We're in Dallas, but we
know you're
claim
in
the whole state. Yes, that's true.
Okay, you've got 4 minutes.
All right. Thank you, Mason. So endowed funds do enable us to take a leadership role in responding to current needs in the community, and you've heard some wonderful examples so far tied into higher education, into the founding of America. I want to tell you a story this morning about potato chips. So in Dallas, back in the 1940s and 50s, there was a local businessman named Granville Morton who had a sandwich shop in downtown Dallas. And in his spare time in running that sandwich shop, Granville Morton figured out a great recipe for frying up slices of potatoes. And his potato chips were incredibly popular in this little diner that he ran, and so popular that he eventually sold the diner and created a company called Morton Foods, where he sold Morton's potato chips. Some of you may remember Morton's potato chips, which eventually became part of General Mills. When that happened, Mr. Morton, who came from very humble beginnings, suddenly had the capacity to be much more involved in his community in a lot of ways. And a vehicle for doing that included taking a lot of General Mills stock, about $4 million worth of that stock, and putting it into an endowed fund at Communities Foundation of Texas. Originally, like I said, that stock was worth $4 million. Today, that stock is worth almost $19 million. And over the years, it has enabled us to make grants of over $23 million back into the community to address all kinds of community needs. And typically, when you think of the power of endowments, you're going to think of grant making and some of the traditional ways that a resource like that makes a big difference in the lives of people. Certainly, it provides a constant resource to be able to respond in times of natural disaster and crisis, to be able to respond to emerging community needs as they evolve over time. The kind of flexibility that comes with that is really important. But there are some other ways that an endowment can provide the resources for community leadership that you may not be thinking about. Let me describe some of the things that community foundations do, and there are over 800 now community foundations all across the United States. We're just one of those. We spend a lot of time collaborating with families, talking about what they want to accomplish through their philanthropy and how their philanthropy can be more strategic. That's not a line of business that pays for itself, but it's incredibly important for that kind of collaboration and the kind of difference that it makes in a local community. Same is true for producing what we call in Dallas a giving guide. It's an annual sort of menu of options where our own fund holders at Communities Foundation of Texas, but also the entire community, can see a listing of current community needs and ways that their charitable giving and their philanthropy can make the biggest difference, where they get the biggest bang for the buck during any given year. All of those things are important free resources to the community, but they are paid for out of our operating budget. And our operating budget, in part, is funded by an annual administrative fee that comes to create that revenue off of the stable pool of endowment dollars that are managed at the Community Foundation. One of the best examples, though, of leverage and impact that we see in the community that comes out of those long-term endowments that's different than regular grant making, we support a community-wide giving day that happens each year in Dallas-Fort Worth. It's called North Texas Giving Day. It has now become a vehicle where over 70,000 people, families, companies all across the region come together in a single day to support local nonprofits. Last year, they donated over $33 million in 18 hours to lift up the entire local not-for-profit community. That's also a great resource for the entire region that affects so many organizations and countless lives. But the administrative side of running that is supported by our operating budget that is fueled by permanent resources like those endowment funds. So thank you for already recognizing the significance of the leadership role that endowment can support in a community. I affirm you. You're obviously an incredibly brilliant audience already. I just want to encourage you to hold true to your values and convictions and continue to vote and vote in favor of the potato chip. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brent. Will Heaton, Director of Policy and Public Affairs at the Center for Employment Opportunities.
Thank you, Mason. Good morning, everyone. So it's a pleasure to be here. I have a little bit of a different perspective because I'm the lone representative from the grantee perspective up here. But I think equally as important is our effort to build a reserve within our own organization, the Center for Employment Opportunities, is really to allow us to have even more impact on a much greater scale beyond the current communities where we serve as we continue to grow our program. And so the Center for Employment Opportunities is one of the largest reentry service providers in the country in terms of working with individuals that are returning home from incarceration. And what we do is we were founded on the belief that by equipping individuals with both the soft skills and hard skills that could help them not only find a job, but keep a job, that it could be a huge driver in terms of reducing recidivism and helping individuals have that core stabilizing piece within their lives upon which they could rebuild themselves within the community. And so we were started in New York City back in the 1970s as a pilot project of the Vera Institute. And in 1996, they spun us off into our own standalone 501c3. And for the last 20 years, we've continued to grow. Back in 2009, we had an opportunity through some philanthropic support and through some public support to be able to expand beyond New York City. And today we work in 4 states, have 11 sites across the country, and serve over 4,500 people each year. We've been shown in a couple of different random control trials that our methodology as compared to that control group has been able to reduce recidivism rates across a various number of factors by up to 22%. Which is pretty significant as compared to many of our colleagues. What we did coming out of that study is we knew that to continue to grow and to be able to continue to provide services to more communities is that we were going to have to start building an operating reserve or an endowment. And what that really allows us to be able to do is to go into communities where there may not be immediate support and to be able to make an upfront investment within those communities to set up new sites and new operations. And then as we continue to build that reputation, it's allowed us to really attract other types of philanthropic support and support from either the state or the federal governments in many cases. And so one way that I really like to equate this is the sort of similar to what, in the private sector, what venture capital does, or what a foundation oftentimes can do with their endowments beyond just traditional grant making, where by making investments into an organization, it gives them more capacity and flexibility to grow, to kind of experiment with their program, to see what really does work or what might not work, and to be able to really further enhance that. And so a quick statistics that I found was really interesting. In last year's Council of Nonprofits State of the Sector, it said that 53% of over the 5,500 nonprofits that responded had less than 3 months of operating reserves on hand. And so you think about the fragile nature of so many organizations throughout the nonprofit sector, that an operating reserve can really be a tremendous tool, as it is with our organization, and it's going to allow us. We're going to be expanding into 4 more sites just this year, and probably 4 more states over the next 3 years, because we've been able to start building that operating reserve that really gives us the flexibility to grow and increase our effectiveness.
Will, thank you very much. You all have just heard the best of the best on endowed philanthropy, and we now need to decide who most persuaded you that lifelong philanthropy is crucial to addressing our long-term problems and solving and coming up with long-term solutions. Could we put the 4 arguments up, the one right there? Thank you. So let's go through them one more time, and then I'll ask you all to vote a second time. A, our endowment allows us to continue the legacy of our donor, presented by Jean Cochran. B, our endowed funds make it possible for us to maintain and utilize our diverse and complicated assets to keep the past alive, presented by Scott Callan. C, our endowed funds enable us to take a leadership role in responding to current needs in our community, and vote for the potato chip we've been asked, Brent Christopher. That was not a personal endorsement.
Right.
That was just reminding you who said what. And C, an endowment will allow us to grow into the future, presented by Will Heaton. So now it is time to vote a second time and let us know if they changed your mind. Yes, ma'am.
Isn't there an E, all of the above?
Not today, no, because we have to,
In
we have a
reality,
prize.
yes. But at the moment,
There are only 4 contestants. We're not going to complicate it. The best one. Is it working? Yeah.
Donor legacy.
Stayed the same. That concludes our contest today. But let's convince our lawmakers that a short-sighted approach to philanthropy is not the best answer to solving big issues, nor is it the best way to plan for our future. I want to thank all of you, and I will deliver the prize to Brent Christopher. Who won.
oh, thank you very much.
That concludes this year's contest. So now we know what money can buy. Not love.
Well done.